Today I am making fudge, and I make my own sweetened condensed milk. So the recipe calls for butter, but I really prefer coconut oil because it's better for me. So I'm starting with my coconut oil, and then I'm going to add my half and half, and of course everything's organic. And then lastly I add my sugar. I'm going to slowly let this boil for about 5 hours, and then it should be evaporated enough that even though that I should be down about a half a cup of the half and half that I put in. My liquid should be about a half a cup less in about 5 hours. I'm just going to boil this actually simmer it on very low and just let it go long and slow. My coconut oil has melted, and I'm not quite steaming yet, but soon it should start steaming, and then I'll actually see the milk starting to thicken up. And that's how you make your own sweetened condensed milk without any chemicals or anything. You just do it yourself. It takes a long time, but it's well worth it. Okay, so my sweetened condensed milk is coming along, and you can see the line here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to gauge how much evaporation I have by trying really hard not to mess up that line so that I can see how much I've evaporated. And when I've evaporated a little bit more, I'll test to see how much volume I have, but I can tell by how non-viscous this is that I have a lot of dissolving yet to go. Okay, I'm going to test this and see if I've evaporated enough. You can see my original line of evaporation right there. So I've actually evaporated quite a bit of milk. It's been about 5 hours. So I'm just going to test it in a measuring cup and see if I've evaporated enough. Okay, you can see that I have probably about a quarter cup more to go. So I'm just going to pour it back in and let it go for another, I don't know, hour, maybe even 2 hours, and see where we are then. Okay, I have about 9 ounces of sweetened condensed milk, which is about what I wanted, and you'll notice that it's brown and it didn't start out brown. Part of that is that I started out with organic half and half as well as organic cane sugar, and I've tried using organic coconut sugar, but for some reason it's really fibrous, and it turns into this fibrous gummy gunk when you start evaporating it down. The texture is all wrong to try to use for fudge. So now the last thing I'm going to do is add about a half a teaspoon of organic vanilla and stir it together. I'm out of time for the day, obviously, since it took all day, and so I'll start tomorrow to make my fudge. Okay, so I'm ready to go ahead and finish my fudge. So I'm going to pour in my chocolate chips and my organic sweetened condensed milk that I made yesterday. And since it's still cold, I'm going to have to scoop it out of the container. Now, I already have my container that I'm going to put the fudge in pre-papered, because once this gets going, it's going to go really fast, and I'm not going to have time to stop and paper my container at that point. The recipe calls for you to put in wax paper, line your pan with wax paper. I don't know, I'm not real sure about that, because you know, you're putting hot fudge in there to set up. What's to stop the hot fudge from getting some of that wax into your fudge? So I don't use wax paper, I actually use parchment paper. And I'm going to go ahead and add my salt. Of course, my pink salt, and it just calls for a 1/4 teaspoon. And then once I turn on my heat, this is going to go really fast, and I'm going to get a close-up with the camera so you can really get a good look at how the fudge looks as it's beginning to finish. Okay, I have my heat turned on, and I forgot to point out that I like to use a square bottom skillet, mostly because it's easier for me to get all the sides scraped really well. So I have the heat on. Chocolate you have to be really careful with because chocolate will burn quite easily. At 120 degrees, chocolate is burned on you. So I have my heat on, but it's only on medium-low. It's a number 3 on my electric burner. And now I'm not going to abandon this. I'm going to sit here and stir it until we get fudge. And just try to keep my sides scraped down and stir until the chocolate melts and we definitely have fudge. Oh, I'm also using a silicone spatula so it doesn't leach any plastic into my fudge. And this is a stainless steel pan so that I don't get anything from my pan into my fudge. It's real, people don't think about it, but it's real easy to leach your cooking, whatever you're using for your cooking instruments, your pans and stuff. It's real easy to leach that right into your food. And I want this to be as tasty and delicious and chem-free as I can possibly get it, so I'm real careful about the cooking utensils that I use. Alright, I don't know if you can tell, but we're starting to get a little bit of melt here. My sweetened condensed milk is definitely starting to look chocolatey. This is really a lot of work, as you can imagine. It's keeping it moving around so nothing has long enough to sit on the heat and burn. Because if I could have a thermometer that was testing every little square inch of this, you would find that different parts of this are really a different temperature right now. And that's why you want to keep it moving, especially when you're melting chocolate. And this is a 51% cacao dark chocolate chip. It's a cooking chocolate chip. It's you can put it in chocolate chip cookies. I do put it in chocolate chip cookies, but for a lot of people it might be a little bitter for them and they prefer the milk chocolate. I don't use milk chocolate at all. I don't even buy it. Alright, it's starting to look melty in chocolate. And another thing that will happen with chocolate, as with butter and coconut oil, is the heat will carry itself. So once I get to a certain part of melt, it says to bring it to a boil, but what I'll do when it starts looking completely melted is I'll actually stop and turn down my heat. I won't turn it off because it needs to come to a boil, but I'll turn it down so that I don't burn my chocolate, because that's one of my biggest concerns. And you've probably tasted burned chocolate and you thought there was maybe toffee in your chocolate. No, it was probably burned. Also, burned chocolate gets a little bit of a bitter taste to it as well. And with 51% cacao, I already have all the bitter taste I need, so I just want to make sure I don't burn my chocolate here. Ooh, my hand's starting to get sore from keeping this moving. It's a lot of weight. It's I think this will make about 5 pounds of fudge when I finish with it. I'm opting, if you notice, I don't have any nuts. I'm opting to not put any nuts in this. I'm opting to just go for the real creamy texture. And so there will not be any nuts in this particular batch of fudge. But you can, in fudge, you can, if you can think of it, you can put it in your fudge. I won a chocolate contest one time by making a fudge that had, there's some not on my burner, it had bacon bits in it, and I had homemade the bacon bits, so I knew that there was no, with a nitrite-free pork, so I knew that there was no chemicals in my bacon bits, and I surprisingly I wasn't really thinking I was going to win, but I won, and it really surprised me. Okay, so now you can see I'm starting to get that texture, that I'm getting some good melting going on, and like I said, my heat will carry pretty good. So I'm going to just turn this down. I turn it down to 2, so hopefully I won't burn. Oops, a little bit of splooge there. Hopefully I won't burn my fudge here. Alright, it's starting to move a little easier, and actually when the fudge is done it'll be just as hard, if not harder, to move again. But you can see that my chocolate chips are really starting to melt, even though I've already turned down my heat. I turned it down to about a 2 on my electric burner. It took me a long time. I've always cooked with gas. Chocolate everywhere. I've always cooked with gas, and it took me a long time when we moved into this house to learn how to cook with electric. I had many burned projects, for lack of a better way of putting it, when we first moved in here, because I had to learn how to cook on electric, and it's a substantially different experience than cooking with gas. With gas, alright, we're starting to get that fudge look. With gas, there's an immediate response to you changing the burner, and so you turn it down and immediately the amount of heat going to your whatever you're cooking goes down. But with an electric burner, you turn it down, and it takes a while for it to actually cool down to the point of whatever you turn it down to. So with fudge, how I've decided, because I've never actually seen it boil, although it says boil it, and how I've decided that I have boil is it will get really shiny, and when it gets really shiny, it's done. Right now, it's really, I went ahead and turned off my burner. I can tell that it's plenty hot enough, and it is really much harder to stir actually than it was at the very beginning. It's very thick, and it's actually much harder to stir right now. You can see that shiny look starting to take on that shiny look of done fudge. We're not quite there yet though, and keeping it off the sides of my pan. Another reason why I like using a square bottom skillet for this is that I can go around and get all the corners with my spatula, so I don't have any bits that really didn't get cooked or mixed in with all the other, with my sweetened condensed milk, although I can't imagine that would happen at this point. So I'm starting to get that shine. I'm starting to get that texture that tells me that my fudge is almost done. And I've turned off my burner, so while I still have it on the burner, oh, there we go. See, did you see that? That's that shiny that tells me my fudge is about done. So you've got to be careful again, because you can easily overcook your fudge. So I pulled it off my burner completely. I'm going to stir a little bit more, and you can see that shiny that tells me my fudge is about done. Now this recipe calls for me to add a teaspoon and a half of vanilla. So, of course, since I've made everything else with high-quality ingredients, why wouldn't I use a high-quality vanilla? And it calls for 1.5 teaspoons. So there's 1 teaspoon. Here's 1/2 teaspoon. And I need to get this stirred in real good, and then it's ready to put right straight into my pan with the parchment lining. You can see that real fudgy texture, that shiny. That shiny tells me I'm done. My fudge is done. It's not overcooked. It's not undercooked. It's done. Alright, we're going to call my vanilla well mixed in, and so now I'm going to, while it's still very hot, I'm going to put it into the form. Oh, it's so heavy. So at first, because I can barely even lift this pan with my left hand, I'm just going to spoon it in until I can pour from my pan. Alright. One last little scrape around. So I want to show you real quick that the pan, because my fudge was done, it actually scraped out really, really easily. Am I showing you my fudge? Alright, here we go. So now I'm just going to smooth out and fill every corner of my papered pan. And I chose to go with a perfect square so that I could cut up my fudge into little squares. And ever how I leave the top of this is how it's going to stay. So I try to even out the thickness, and I try to make sure that there's no strange marks. I like to kind of leave swirls, but sometimes that's hard to do. Today it seems like it's not really going swirly for me. Alright, let's just get this off there. That's my last little bit. Alright, now I also like to do some sprinkle of some coarse salt. This is kosher salt, so I'm just going to sprinkle it on there. Chocolate and that salt really taste well together, and I've had a lot of compliments since I started putting salt directly on my fudge. So now I can just let this cool at room temperature, and it's going to solidify. I don't put this directly into the refrigerator while it's really hot, because I found that a little oil sheen will gather on the top of my fudge, which is kind of gross. So I let it cool to room temperature. I don't know, it wasn't quite room temperature, it was still a little bit warm, but it wasn't very hot. And then I put it in the refrigerator, and it only took probably an hour for it to completely set up. So I'm just going to go through, and I'm going to cut it, and I'm going to do my best to make all my little cubes exactly the same. The first thing I do is trim off the excess so it can be a square. And then I just I estimate about the size of one serving. Fudge, if this was being made for a gift, I would actually have out a ruler and I would have marked the exact size that I wanted to make all the pieces, but because I'm just making this for myself, I'm just estimating the size. And there you have it. I have just reused the paper and lined my container so it doesn't stick to the bottom of my container. I will probably put this back in the refrigerator, but I won't just leave it in the refrigerator because I found that over time the fudge actually starts tasting weird, even with the lid on the container, and the texture goes strange. So I'll put it in the fridge probably for another couple of hours, already cut up, and then I'll leave it out at room temperature unless it gets real hot in the house, which it's winter, so that's probably not going to happen.